Greetings and welcome to our second ever Tavern Talk. My name is Brandy Camel, also known as Nevelistus, your community manager for Diablo 3 and your host for today. Joining me today, if you've never been with us on a Tavern Talk before, is a few of our developers, and we're here to kind of hang out, chat casually about the game, and today in particular we're going to focus on seasons. So without further ado, allow me to introduce you to Senior Technical Game Designer Wyatt Chang.
Hello everyone.
We've got Associate Game Designer Don Vu, and Game Designer Travis Day.
How you doing?
Thank you guys so much for joining us today and, taking some time out to chat about things and answer a few questions later. So,
Absolutely.
How's everybody doing?
All right. Good. Yeah. Excited to be here, talking about seasons in season 2.
Need more coffee.
Yeah, I think I always need more coffee. So today, as I mentioned before, we wanted to bring everybody together to kind of get in preparation for season 2 and take a look at seasons, see where they've been, where they are now, and where they're going in the future. We'll also be taking some questions a little bit later, but before we get there, I thought it best that we start at the beginning. So, season 1 just wrapped up on February 3rd, and I wanted to know, first off, how you guys as players did during the season.
Well, I played mostly only hardcore actually, and I played my wizard, crusader, and monk. And before the season started, I set a goal for myself. I was like, I got to get top 100 on leaderboard for each of my classes, and then I'm proud to say that I got top 100 on each wizard, crusader, and monk on the hardcore season leaderboard.
Very nice.
Yeah, that's awesome. I had a lot of fun this season as well. I rolled a monk, a hardcore as well, a wizard, and in softcore I rolled a demon hunter and a barbarian. So I played those, and that was a lot of fun too.
Yeah, I had a good time. I started a monk, which I'd never played before, and got up, I think, in the first couple days up to the top of the leaderboard for the monks, and the top of the 4-player leaderboard with some of my buddies, and did a little bit of demon hunter.
Very cool. Looking back on season 1, what are your favorite memories from season 1?
Wyatt dying a lot, like a whole lot. It was awesome.
I did die a lot. In my defense, so one of my deaths was actually my fault. That's a learning. They say that if you play hardcore, you remember every single one of your deaths. And I was on my barbarian in a greater rift. It wasn't even that high. It was like 24 or something like that. And I came across the succubuses that do the armor debuff.
Right.
And there was a bunch of them. And I leaped away, but too late. And my barbarian actually died on leap at the end of it. It was a leap quake barb. But another one of my deaths actually wasn't really my fault. I was in a hotel. And I was on vacation in Asheville, North Carolina, sitting in a hotel, and these guys were telling me, don't play hardcore on hotel internet. Just don't do it. And John Yang was telling me, I can't believe you're playing hardcore on hotel internet. And I didn't listen to him. And then the power went out.
Oh no.
And then the power came back on, and I'm going to log in, and then as I'm logging in, I get a text message. Yeah, we have it here. I get a text message from John, who took a picture of his screen telling me that I died. And there it is, like they're just like, oh, you disconnected hotel internet, big mistake.
Like that you went offline and then you died.
I know. It's like clearly like, bam, power went out. I'm like, no!
22 hours, man. You put some time into that guy, too.
Yeah.
Well, fortunately, Dawn power leveled me up a replacement barbarian, later that night, so that was good.
Oh, so you did a better job power leveling him up than you did for me. Because
I like to know that I didn't die the whole season.
You're all just softcore. Just say it.
Well, for me, I think one of the best memories for season 1 was the start of the season 1 when me and Wyatt, we played at the office for 7 hours straight, I believe.
Yeah.
And then we actually left the milestone meeting early to play season 1. A milestone meeting for us is we get the team together and we show off what we do for what we did for the month. And then I think it was going a little bit long. And then I was like looking at Wyatt, looking at my watch, and I was like, hey, we gotta go. And then we kind of just walked off and then started playing.
Yeah, it's the last Friday of every month. The team reviews everything that had gotten done that month, and usually it starts at 5 and ends at 6, but the season starts at 6. And if I'm not mistaken, it was actually our game director, Josh Mascara, who was up in front of the team presenting, and Don and I just kind of like backpedal out of the room. We're like, peace out, we got a season to start.
John Yang was way less subtle than you two. John like I think, stood up and walked out while Josh was talking. We're like, where are you going? And he's like, Don and Wyatt aren't here either. Just say and left. So,
That was a lot of fun.
in case you felt the bus tire on you.
Yeah, well.
I know you guys spent some time trying to do the Speed Racer conquest too.
Oh yeah, that was a lot of fun. We like dedicated several weekends to it. We had like spreadsheets set up. We had 4 players in the game. We were all on Skype. We're all talking like, hey, talk to this NBC, go this way. We're splitting this way, and it was a lot of fun.
Yeah, I recorded the whole thing, and we reviewed it, and we tried to like find places that we could cut it down. I think we got it down to about an hour and 3 minutes. And I watched some of the videos that people had posted of doing the Speed Racer conquest. That is a tough one. We have kind of a similar. We really liked the way it made players play in a different way. Like normally you're, either farming Torment 6 rifts, or you're doing adventure mode, or for a lot of players, greater rifts. And it's kind of like a nice diversion, right? It's something different. It requires a lot of coordination, a lot of teamwork. The fact that not even 1,000 people completed it, in the whole season, kind of is a testament to how difficult that conquest was, and huge props to all the people who were able to get that conquest.
Yeah,
that was a tough one.
I was looking at the leaderboards just the other day. I think it's less than 300 people total that managed to complete
we
it.
really like that alternate way to play. So like in season 2, we didn't want to do an exact copy because it was so similar, but there's one to like kill all the bosses on Torment 6 within a time limit of each other, and so it's kind of similar but a little bit different.
So on the development side of things, what were the goals of season 1 so that folks can kind of get an inside look at the way you guys looked at it as developers?
Well, in 2.1 we introduced seasons, leaderboard, and the greater rifts, which were all pretty big deals. I think greater rifts and leaderboards go hand in hand together pretty well. One thing that we wanted them to do is bring a sense of community. I think it's super fun to watch your favorite streamer to push greater rifts and cheer them on, learn some things, and maybe even compete with them.
Yeah, I'm thrilled to have our seasons in. It was something that we had initially actually tried to do for launch, both seasons, and it's going to be our first content patch, and we learned a lot, and we're looking forward to more.
Very cool. It's very accurate to say then that we learned a lot from season 1, and we've taken a lot of those lessons and applied them for not only the next season but future seasons as well. So what are some of the lessons in particular that we learned from season 1?
So at the beginning of season 1, I'd say there was a lot of methods to level really fast that didn't really support the gameplay that was fun in Diablo 3. What lessons we learned about that was in season 2 we won't focus so much on leveling and try to squash those leveling clever uses of game mechanics.
Yeah, I think we also we learned a lot about the greater rifts. The dependency on pylons. We had mentioned at BlizzCon that there was probably just too much randomness in the greater rifts. And sometimes you'd have a low density population, and sometimes you'd have a high density, or the most popular is for a big chunk of time, people relied heavily on getting a conduit pylon right near a Rift Guardian, or even saving the conduit pylon for the Rift Guardian. That wasn't really the intention. It's not a fun way to play those rifts. So going forward, we changed it in 2.1.2, and so season 2 will benefit from all of those 2.1.2 changes, where the pylons have a much more even distribution. And the density in all of the rifts are way up, and we've seen the community feedback that people really appreciate and enjoy the more consistent density and the more predictable level layouts, so that you don't feel like success is determined by RNG.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I learned when I was playing through the season, we'd talked a lot when we were internally trying to tune item drop rates for a long time over internal alpha, during beta, during release of ROS. And we'd always sort of speculated, if we drop too much stuff, you're going to run out of stuff to do real quick, which maybe is or isn't true. But I started my monk with a bunch of buddies, and we started leveling, and we were having a great time. And I think about 2 weeks into the season, I came into the office like, hey guys, I got everything. I have surpassed all of my initial ROS characters in 2 weeks, and it's awesome. I got all these sets, and it's really cool, and I'm doing high level greater rifts. But maybe we need something for me to still want, even though like I'm the guy who's going to play this game a whole lot. And that was sort of the starting point for the idea of ancient items. Like, well, maybe we just put in something to keep chasing, even though it's really awesome to get all of my sets done so quickly.
I know we also did a little bit of reflection on the length of the season as well. Lots of players feel that the season kind of went on a while, so.
Yeah, we started off with, we try to compare it to like Diablo 2 seasons. They ran from like anywhere from 6 to 12 months. And we want to be shorter than that. And 5 months still feels a little too long. So in the future, hopefully future seasons will be shorter than even 5 months. And we'll go from there.
Yeah, I mean, realistically, a lot of the season length is also determined now by our development schedule. You know, in season 1, we released 2 different patches during the season. And the reason we did that is we kind of thinking, okay, well, we have some content and we want to release it, but there was a little bit of a negative reaction. It's a mixed bag, right? Like people who care a lot about the leaderboards react a little negatively to having the content changed mid-season. But you know, for the majority of players who really don't care about the leaderboards, they're just kind of playing the game and they're on their Rift and they're worried about their personal progression. You know, it's really nice to have that content right away. Going forward, I think our plan is to end a season early in the week, release a patch, and then begin the new season. So you can probably expect future seasons to be shorter, but also for the content patches to happen, you know, in between seasons.
With all of that in mind, can we go over some of the features that players can expect will change their gameplay in Season 2 as compared to Season 1? Travis, I know you mentioned ancient items for instance.
Ancient items are really intended just sort of to, I call it, well, we call it internally the long tail. I call it the white whale to chase. But it's just meant for players who do play a lot, like who have farmed out a lot of content, to have something to look forward to. Like if you want to play and try to beat Grade Rift 50 or 60, and you have finished all your sets and everything's awesome, like, well, you still might find really cool things. Like I know a lot of players are like, I need an ancient furnace, or I want an ancient version of all my set items. So I'm really looking forward to seeing how much more gameplay I get out of a season based on that.
Very cool. And the conquests are definitely going.
Yeah, Wyatt touched on it earlier. A really popular conquest was the speedrun conquest, and in Season 2 we have the boss mode conquest where you have to kill all the bosses on Torment 6 within 20 minutes, I believe. Internally we were able to do that, so hopefully you guys can do that as well. Another different kind of conquest, we try to appeal to less hardcore players. So there's one to collect all the lore books, and there's your usual like Greater Rift ones and stuff like that.
Yeah, there's and then you also mentioned a lot of the Greater Rift changes will certainly be.
Yeah, the Greater Rift changes. As I said, they went in patch 2.12, so those changes are live now.
Right.
And you know, we're kind of we'll have our eye on it. You know, the more regular pylons and you know, another change that we made. You know, I kind of hinted at it earlier today with the layout of the dungeons. There used to be like these long dead ends or big loops, which then, you know, kind of brought you back to where you were, and then you had to like, basically it's not a lot of fun to be on a timer. You're on the clock, you're trying to beat 15 minutes, and then you have to traverse, you know, a huge chunk of completely empty, cleared terrain, either because you're backtracking off of a dead end or whatever. And we basically reined that in a lot. So if there's gonna be a dead end, it's only gonna be, you know, a couple screens, you know, 1.5 screens at most, and then you can get back on your way.
Yeah, I've certainly noticed that just in running stuff in between the seasons. So it's definitely a much nicer, like,
Yeah.
oh, okay, oh, no, I see it. All right, let's turn around and get this back.
Yeah, and the Rift Guardians got updates as well. You know, there were some Rift Guardians that were, you know, basically much more difficult than others. There's still improvements on that arena. You know, we've still got our eye on it. We've received some feedback that, you know, there's still the Rift Guardian that you're excited to see. So you know, we're not done yet. We still love the game and we're still developing for it. So we'll keep working on it.
I'm really looking forward to starting Season 2 and getting to experience all of these things. Out of everything that's coming in Season 2, what are you guys looking forward to the most?
Playing with our buddies again. You know, like I said, my favorite part was when the season first started, playing with Wyatt. Just getting the social experience together, that was pretty fun. One other thing that I'm looking forward to is Gungdo gear being released on Season 2. That I think that legendary is going to change a lot for the monks, and I'm looking forward to using it with the new Sun Wukong set.
I'm looking forward to just the social experience also. Like, when the first season started, it was a lot of fun. We had a bunch of our buddies come back online who hadn't been there for a while, so it was just good seeing all of my friends online. Like, if I pull up my list, it was just like Diablo, 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 Diablo. Like, yeah, good Diablo.
I'm looking forward to the rapid rate of progression again. You know, it's a little tough to say goodbye to characters you've invested a lot into, but it is so fun to, you know, level up your legendary gems again. I mean, it's like your progression slows down, but you know, I happen to really enjoy, you know, getting a character 70 and then crafting my, you know, all guild set and my Ashera set and getting those Forgotten Souls to do that and then collecting those legendary gems and then leveling them up. It's you know, you kind of lose that after it's all done and then the progress is slow. So I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah, one of my favorite things to do at the start of the season is just leveling my artisans. I don't know why I find that so fun, but that's really fun for me, is seeing that. Especially,
train button.
yeah, you hit that train button, and if you've saved up for a while and you just hit it a bunch of times and watch it all grow,
Totally.
it's great. Is there anything that we're ready to share about future seasons beyond season 2?
You know, one thing for future season, I worry that maybe there's a little bit too much emphasis on leaderboards and not enough emphasis on just, you know, what have you done, you know? I was talking to a buddy of mine who plays with his wife, and they play together, and they weren't super far in Greater Rift. They're like on Greater Rift 18 or something like that, but they, you know, they don't look out on, you know, the leaderboards, or they don't scour the internet for the latest. They're just having fun, the two of them, and they figure out their own builds and combinations and have a lot of fun with the game. And he said, hey, you know, Wyatt, you know, our goal is to beat Greater Rift 30 before the end of the season. And of course, Greater Rift 30 was beaten by other people way back in, you know, September, October, but and August probably. But he was like, no, we want to do this. And he did. You know, he texted me like 2 weeks ago, and he was like, "We did it! You know, we beat 30," and he was so happy. And I wish that the game celebrated that more. I wish the game recognized your individual accomplishments, and I think that's something that we'd like to add. I like to use the analogy of like running, right, or weightlifting. People who run a weightlift, they know you don't run because you hope to be in the Olympics one day. Usually a lot of people who run a lot want to beat their personal best. Same thing for weightlifting is, you know, you're not going for the strongest man in the world. You're just trying to beat your personal best, and that's satisfying.
I think kind of keying off that, personal goals are really important, and what's really important is knowing when it's a good time to leave. Like if you reach your personal goals, you feel good about it, and you can leave the game. And I think if there was endpoints that were provided for each type of player, the hardcore, the more casual, something like that, then you could leave the game and feel good about it, and then come back later. Because I think Diablo is a game that you should feel good leaving, and then come back when the next season starts. It's that game that you never uninstall because you go play Warlords, and then you come back because season 3 is starting on Valentine's Day weekend.
So this has been a really fantastic insight to not only what you guys have been working on, but just kind of what goes on in your minds behind the scenes as something as big as Seasons is being developed and worked on. We've also been collecting a bunch of player questions, and we've got some time now to address some of those. We've been collecting them from a variety of places, mostly from our website where we announced the Tavern Talk in the first place, as well as on Twitter. And we're going to go ahead and go through those now, but before we do, I want to let all of you in Twitch chat know that we'll also be taking a few live questions. So if you've got questions, especially about Seasons, let us know in chat, and we'll see how many of them we can get to closer to the end of the program. The first question that I have, I couldn't really attribute it to one individual person because I have just seen this all over the place. But players were super excited at BlizzCon, particularly about the new sets that we showed off. So one of the questions we get a lot is, where are those sets? How are they doing? When can we expect to see them?
Yeah, the new sets are something we showed off at BlizzCon. It feels like an eternity ago at this point. But the new sets are coming in a future patch. We've still been iterating on some of them, like we had showed off originally the Barbarian set. And we have plans still to like modify it from what players had seen. The basic idea is still going to be the same. We wanted a set that's all about Whirlwind, because Whirlwind Barbarians are so awesome.
Whirlwind is awesome.
So the focus is still a Whirlwind set. We just weren't entirely happy with this sort of maintenance-y, like, oh, I got a Whirlwind, but then I got to rend things, and Whirlwind's no good till I rend things. So we're still working on that, but internally we've been testing them, and so far they're a ton of fun.
Very cool. We have those to look forward to. The next question, or the first player question that I have, comes from Jake on our forums.
Oh, Jake.
And
Jake.
he asks us, is there anything you can share regarding class representation in group Greater Rift leaderboards?
Yes. So, I mean, group Greater Rift leaderboards, in terms of like, there's these template, compositions that are sort of regarded as the best. Really view that as something that's in flux. I mean, ultimately, our number one goal is to provide really fun, legendary items that provide new ways to play. And that has an effect on the power level of the classes. And players can see this from the development of the game, since ROS shipped, through the patches, we've been releasing more and more legendaries. And the composition of what's considered, best on the top of the leaderboards shifts. I mean, it even shifted over the course of Season 1. What was at the top of the 4-player leaderboard in the beginning of the season, middle, and end of the season kind of changed a little bit. I mean, there are some trends, but we expect it to change again. We rework sets and change them. And our priority is to make sure, like, we want the classes to be in a roughly equal power level, but this is also a game in flux. This isn't like StarCraft 2, where we're trying to balance the units so perfectly that it is esport worthy, and we want to touch it as little as possible to allow the meta game to settle. That's not the kind of game that we're making. We're making a primarily PvE focused game where we want to provide really cool ways to play, and that's going to be the emphasis. And I think that the way it shakes out at the top of the 4-player leaderboard is just it shakes out a certain way, and players figure out what the best combinations are, and that changes over time.
I think a good example of like the game evolving and playstyles evolving is when we introduced the new Sangoku set in 2.12. There are a lot of playstyles that first was good. There was a fire ranged monk with bells. There was a Tempest Rush Flurry build that was really good. But I think right now the top build is EP with lightning and a lot of CDR. But when Season 2 comes around with Gungdo gear, it's gonna add a lot of more playstyles to the game. Gungdo good gear in Season 2, whenever you're exploding palm, the explosion applies exploding palm to everything it hits. So that's going to change that, the monk leaderboards and the group leaderboards like crazy.
Insane.
Yeah.
It's insane.
Yeah. I think, we actually have a picture of it on the screen for those of you that haven't seen Gungdo gear yet. So that's what it'll look like when you can manage to get your hands on one in Season 2.
Unless you get an ancient one.
Unless you get an ancient one, yeah. Then it'll be even more
better.
impressive. So that brings us to our next question. This one comes from @Dibface and came from Twitter. And they ask, what was the reasoning behind making new Legendary Gems season exclusive?
Yeah, so I mean, all of our seasons we want to really keep this sense that they're fresh and there's something to look forward to. Legendary Gems really are just like any other legendary or any other item in our game. It's just another thing that we can give players. So we just wanted to make as much cool stuff as we could, including potions and armor and things like Gungdo gear, and legendary gems too. We want to give more gems to the system in general because that's a relatively new feature that people seem to like. So it seemed like a natural fit.
Yeah, I love leveling up my legendary gems. I mentioned earlier, it's just, you kind of run your rifts and you level them up. And I'm really excited about the new gems. We have 3 new legendary gems coming in for Season 2. Travis, correct me if I'm wrong, but one of them is focused on health regeneration. And then another one reduces non-physical damage that you take. They're both defensively oriented gems, and that's because players have mentioned that we don't have enough defensive options. Like, if a player wants to be defensive, we want to provide tools to allow them to be more defensive, particularly if they're pushing those higher grader rifts. And then the third legendary gem coming in on Season 2 is actually the one I'm most excited about because, as Travis said, I lose some hardcore characters. Not always my fault, but but it's a power leveling gem. And I'm super excited about that. We're actually changing it up. Usually legendary gems can only go in a ring or an amulet, but this legendary gem can only go in your weapon. And so that actually would allow you to wear a 4 in theory, but it's really a twink gem. It increases experience from kills, but the best part is if you rank it up to level 25, it reduces the level requirement of any item that it's socketed into, so basically the weapon, down to level 1. So you can hand a level 70 weapon to your next character and level them up super fast.
It's just crazy.
It's amazing.
It's pretty awesome.
Yeah, I mean, early testing shows that with the experience bonus and all the damage, you can actually power level yourself faster than a friend might in certain circumstances.
Yeah.
Just don't die with it.
I was going to say, it's definitely faster than
Why don't
non
use a couple of them?
I don't want to lose my gem while I'm leveling a
I'll put
character.
money on it.
That'll be the worst.
We'll get a side bet after this.
All right. Our next question also comes from Twitter. At Ventilator asks, is auto pickup of crafting mats and gems coming anytime soon? With the new goblins, it is even more annoying than it was.
Yeah, the treasure goblins. So the treasure goblins have always been an iconic part of Diablo 3, right? Like people, it's sort of been the poster child in a lot of ways. We have statues of treasure goblins that we've made. And in a recent patch, we actually added more types of treasure goblins to the game because people like them so much. There's the odious collector who drops lots of crafting materials. There's a gem hoarder treasure goblin who runs and drops lots of gems behind him. And the blood shard goblin drops blood shards as he runs and just, explodes with tons of blood shards when you kill him. And it's awesome. But, it does cause you to click a lot. Obviously, the immediate solution people suggest is auto pickup. And while that would solve the clicking, what we found, and we're trying to be a little bit careful about this, is when we make something auto pickup, it really disconnects you from what you're getting, and people sometimes don't even know what they got. This has definitely happened with gold, and it definitely happens with health potions, where, first you had to pick it up. Now you don't even notice that you're picking up. In the case of health potions, some people are annoyed that it's being picked up. And we don't want to, basically, I want to preserve that connection that if we give you, 18 crafting mats, you should know that you got 18 crafting mats. And it should feel like you acquired 18 crafting mats. That said, it is a little annoying to click on all the tiny little piles. So we are looking at solutions to try and make that better. As an example, a couple of weeks ago, we hot fixed it so that those crafting mats, they used to drop in 18 piles of 1. So now you'll just get 1 pile of 18 or a couple bigger piles. And that helps a little bit. And that kind of retains what I was talking about, where you still know what you picked up and how much, but you don't have to click quite as much. And we're looking into other similar solutions to try and maintain that physicality.
Oh, very cool. The next question that we have comes from at CluesOXXX. And they ask, what about our other ideas from the Legendary Workshop from BlizzCon? Will we see some of them in the game in the future?
Yeah, there were some really awesome ideas at BlizzCon. The players came up with a lot of really cool stuff. We actually just finished implementing the winning idea last week. But the ideas from the players and from BlizzCon Brainstorm were really great. And we draw inspiration from everywhere. I've been actually, the last week or so, spending a lot of time reading these really cool threads that our players have going on the forums where they come up with an idea and then they name a skill, and then the next person who posts has to come up with a legendary idea for that. So I was reading through 30 pages of ideas, jotting down ideas these are awesome, and some of them sparked my own ideas. I was like, ooh, what about this? So we definitely try to use every source we have for ideas for items in our game. And while I'm not certain we 100% are implementing any of the exact ideas at BlizzCon, it's very likely they'll influence or show up in the game in some way, shape, or form.
Mm-hmm. Maybe not exactly.
Not as listed, but in some spirit of the idea.
Our next question also comes from Twitter. At Tergrand asks, will multi-elemental builds become playable at high difficulty settings, such as using 2 or more different elements as a primary damage source?
It's something we definitely want. I think a good example of that was the Talrasha set. I think right now there's a Torment 6, there's a couple Torment 6 builds with the Talrasha set, but hopefully in the future, in a future patch, we're adding more set bonuses to it, and hopefully it takes the Tal Rasha set up to the level of other sets that are comparable, like or better than Firebirds or even like the Samluku set and stuff like that. So hopefully the changes that we make and the feedback that you give us based on the changes we make will make a Tal Rasha set viable.
Well, also we have the idea that was the BlizzCon item.
Yeah, that's right.
Is a ring that'll be coming out in one of our future patches where. I don't remember the exact implementation details, but the basic idea is like it rotates through the elements and gives you like bonuses to different elements at different times to sort of try and reinforce this idea of like, oh, I want to do Tal Rasha, or I want to do like a cold and fire build of some weird variety.
I know the original suggestion that came from BlizzCon was a wizard source, but I think we've made it a ring.
Yeah, I think we talked about it, and when we were working out the details, the idea of a wizard source was really cool because I was like, dude, it could be like a little freaking snowball, and then it turns into a little flame, and then it turns into a little storm cloud. But we talked about it more, and the ideas come up so many times of like this multi-element build that we were just like, let's make it a ring, let's make it really good, and then everyone who wants to try and play out with new specs can find new specs.
I'm really looking forward to using that ring, by the way. I can't wait to grab that. The next question comes from our forums, and I Love Beer asks, are there any plans to increase build diversity other than narrowing down a few skills through item sets?
Yeah, I mean, that's always our priority whenever we're making new items. We talk about this all the time, but whenever we're having idea brainstorms or trying to come up with like, oh, what are the things we're going to make? One of the things we say a lot is like, well, we want to make stuff for skills that aren't necessarily good or don't get a lot of use, as opposed to skills that people already use. We always want to try to take the things that aren't in the top tier and try to bring them up to the top tier. So, our goal is to sort of just keep adding more items and keep expanding on sets like Tal Rasha's, or making new sets, or retrofitting old items without powers to sort of prop up all these skills that we think are really awesome. Like Whirlwind is a good example where we're like, hey, look, Whirlwind was awesome. It was really iconic. Let's take it. Let's make a whole set, try and reinforce that style of gameplay, and make another viable build for Barbarians.
Yeah, and sometimes build diversity happens, not with a fell swoop, but a lot of steps at a time. Earlier in a patch, we changed Tall Man's Finger, right, which was a ring that instead of summoning a bunch of zombie dogs, summoned one large zombie dog, and we really buffed up the power of that one zombie dog to try and make it more competitive. And will someone kind of make a build out of that? Some people have tried, and that's interesting, but maybe it actually needs another supporting legendary. One of the seasonal items that I'm looking forward to in Season 2 is actually a rework of the Undisputed Champion, which is a Barbarian Mighty Belt. And the Undisputed Champion in Season 2 gives you the effect of all 5 Frenzy runes at once. And that's actually one of my things that I want to try out. Like, I don't know if it's going to be top tier, but I tried to make a build in Season 1 with, I came into the office, I was like, hey, Travis, here we go. Frenzy, Frenzy, two-hander, Depth Diggers, Simplicity, Strength. I read about other people who were trying to do the same thing, and it was pretty fun, it was pretty effective, but it wasn't top tier. And so, we're like, you know what? Let's do this to Undisputed Champion, and that's going to make that build even better. Is that going to make it top tier? Maybe, maybe not. Maybe it'll be good for a certain time while you're waiting to get your 6-piece set, and you're kind of filling this in. A lot of it determines, it's part of the fun of seasons is, what is the order in which you get your different items, which causes you to try different builds that, there's the theoretical best, but what do you have, and how do you do the best with what you have, in your toolbox?
What happens if I use Sacrifice with Tall Man's Finger?
So we reworked Sacrifice as well. It used to be that it sacrificed all of your zombie dogs, but now it just sacrificed one of them. And the explosion from a Sacrifice with a Tall Man's Finger is an extra big explosion.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I know that we did a couple of other revamps that kind of fall in line with this as well. Don, you had mentioned the Sun Wukong set earlier.
The Sun Wukong set, I mentioned it quite a bit. And 212, or prior to 212, the gameplay of the Sun Wukong set was punch, 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 but spam your mantra, which kind of felt weird to do damage by spamming your mantra. In 212, we made it so that whenever you cast a spender, like Wave of Light, Tempest Rush, Lashing Tail Kick, Cyclone Strike, you get a damage buff and you do a bunch of damage. And I think it feels a lot better, one, because you're using your spenders, and two, you're not hurting your wrist by spamming your mantra.
Yeah, we don't really want builds to feel physically painful to
Yeah,
play.
doing
That's
this a
definitely
lot.
not.
That's our number one priority.
The next question comes from our forums as well. BDF asks, are you happy with the relative level of power and/or usage of the season-only items that were introduced in Season 1?
Yeah, I personally am. I mean, our goal is just really to come up with cool toys, cool ideas, right? Like we say all the time, like, let's just give them cool stuff and they'll find crazy things to do with it. And I think a lot of that too is sort of just this notion that we do want to increase diversity, but we also aren't trying to like create your playstyle and hand it to you. We do, in the case of sets, we do, right? Because we want to like reinforce this cool build, or like the Sunwoo Ko set, we've got this really cool Monkey King idea. But a lot of times it's just a matter of like, hey, Gungdo Bracer, what if your exploding palmed everything? And we're like, yeah, let's just make that. So we don't have like some bar for what power level we try to make these things. We just try to keep adding to the pool and creating a deeper and deeper item game for players with the knowledge and expectation, like, they're gonna do crazy stuff. Let's see what happens. This will be fun.
Yeah, there's another Season 2 legendary, the Witch Doctors, Season 2 is called Wormwood. Wormwood's an existing item that came, before, but it didn't have a legendary power. And the new legendary power, if I'm not mistaken, is that it automatically casts Locust Swarm nearby, and it always comes with some poison damage baked in as well. And I'm not 100% sure how everyone's going to use it, but there's a lot of different ways players could use it. I mean, you could use it with a Jade Harvester set to have it cast Locust Swarm for you. Or you could use it in a build that doesn't have Locust Swarm at all. Maybe you're doing, fetishes or Zunimasas, and you use Wormwood to have a Locust Swarm in addition to all of your fetishes. So that'll be kind of interesting to see, from our point of view, yeah, we make the sets, but we put tools in your hands, and the sets don't cover all your slots, right? Yeah. So it's like, okay, well, what other legendary items? And people puzzle out, different ways to drop a piece from their set and complement it with this other legendary item.
Yeah, in Season 1, I was super happy with the Condemned Shield, and that was a seasonal item. I think it was Freydair's Wrath. When you combine that with Blade of Prophecy and a con set, you're just a tank in the middle of everything, it's blowing up everything, and it was super awesome.
I just got an ancient Blade of Prophecy the
nice.
other day.
Nice, that's awesome.
And I stood up out of my chair, had to walk around for a second because it rolled really well. And I'm waiting for Ramaladni's to kind of put the icing on the cake. And now I just need the shield, and I can't wait to roll around with that. I'm really looking forward.
That's
Yeah,
awesome.
thank you.
That's awesome.
The next question comes from Twitter. At Errol Scott asks, any interesting ideas to expand upon adventure mode that you guys are considering for the future?
Yeah, we've been looking at the role that, at level 70, typically people play either adventure mode, rifts, or greater rifts. And we've been looking at the relationship between those three. Not a lot to share yet, although, philosophically, we've sort of established that adventure mode is really fun in the beginning, but particularly with things like Ring of Royal Grandeur, farming, and people really wanted it, they sort of burn themselves out on adventure mode, and we didn't like that. Actually, one of the things we did during Season 1 is we super increased the drop rate of legendaries from those bounty bags. We had lots of people say, I'd love to participate in Season 1, but I just can't bring myself to farm another Ring of Royal Grandeur. So we said, you know what? That should not be the only reason why. Let's change it. So we upped the drop rate, and I think it's now, if you play on Torment 1, it's like a 25% chance of a legendary from a bounty bag, and it scales all the way up to Torment 6, where it's like a 100% chance of getting a legendary, and that makes it way easier to get your Ring of Royal Grandeur. And of course, Season 2, everyone's going to want their ring again, and you play adventure mode a bit. But I think we're looking to try and figure out how do we position adventure mode so it's a fun thing that you can do sort of early in a season, but for players who want to graduate out of it, there is the opportunity to do so.
Cool. We're looking forward to learning more about that in the future. Our next question comes from Twitter, and at Dibface asks, two-handed weapon buffs were great, but now one-handed weapons feel lackluster. Are there any plans to fix this?
I think we're pretty happy all in all with the changes that we've made to two-handers. We know for a long time, like, we had tons of people coming in like, man, why are two-handers so bad? Like, this number isn't big enough. Dual wield's way better. And a lot of people were in that feedback. So John Yang sat down and was like, I'm gonna buff all these things, and he buffed them, and we were like, okay, cool. I think the usage that we see is pretty good. I think a lot of people maybe have this idea that like two-hander and dual wield are going to be somehow like perfectly balanced, and they're going to pick the one they want. And maybe some classes that's the case, but I think we see a fair amount of diversity across like different specs, different classes. Like tons of witch doctors are like, man, I want a furnace, and I think some people like dual wield, some people like two hands. I think our goal really is just to try to provide playstyle choices to people. Best case scenario, we can make some really cool two-handed powers or some really cool one-handed powers, and you just pick the playstyle that works for you. And as long as they're all seeing use, as long as there are people using two-handers and there are people dual wielding, I think we're generally happy.
Yeah, I mean, I'd rather that it wasn't just a math problem, like, X does more DPS than Y, therefore, that's not really a sexy way for players to be making that choice. I'd much prefer, use a Witch Doctor example, I'd much rather say, I'm using Wormwood because it casts Locust Swarm automatically on nearby things, or I'm going to use, Star Metal and a Homunculus or something, to use it. I mean, people aren't doing this right now, but if someone decides to put a build together with Homunculus and Tall Man's Finger to make lots of, to get summon extra large dogs every 3 to 4 seconds and sacrifice them, to kind of use a comparison from what Travis was talking about earlier. Those are more interesting ways to go about gearing rather than just saying, like, even with the furnace with the elite damage, it's a little dry, it's a little too mathy for my tastes.
Oh, yeah.
And I much prefer that people are excited about the power, the legendary power on these items.
Excellent. The next question comes from our forums. Linarian asks, do you plan on enhancing mighty weapons at all, or adding any new legendary affixes to mighty weapons, given that there isn't one in Season 2?
No, they're done. We're done with mighty weapons.
Just forever.
I mean, mighty weapons are absolutely something we are, just like all of our items. We spend a lot of time actually going over existing items, like, okay, what items don't have powers yet? Our first priority is to put powers on those. Once they all have powers, then we're going to keep making more, but those are the focus. Mighty weapons definitely fall in that category. They haven't gotten as much love as some of the other types yet, predominantly because any two-hander is indistinguishable really from a mighty weapon, whereas in the case of, say, like a demon hunter, we can't like make a two-handed sword and go, okay, demon hunters get something new. So it's more a matter of just trying to like make sure everyone gets as much cool stuff as possible, but it's definitely on our to-do list. There's a list of mighty weapons that need abilities, and we're very aware of them.
Very cool. The next question comes from our forums as well, and Tergand asks, during the anniversary stream, Wyatt mentioned that there is some work being put into creating lightning-themed items. When will we see these items in game?
Yeah, right?
Yeah, I remember the conversation we were talking about at the time, and to a degree still today, there was a lot of emphasis on fire as a damage element, and that persists for some classes today still. And a lot of it has to do with some particularly strong elemental items like Cindercoat, gets brought up a lot. And that's a really strong fire-themed item. And I think what we had talked about at the anniversary stream is, fire should not be the only way to play the game. Let's introduce, not just for lightning, but for all the elements. I mean, there are a few in there already of items that provide bonuses to different elements. They just don't happen to be as common in the top tier builds as Cindercoat. So that's something that we can work on. I think Travis had talked about not having a literal Cindercoat, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's a piece of feedback I got a lot when we first ship ROS. People are like, Cindercoat's amazing. Make a frost coat and a lightning coat.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay.
Storm coat.
Yeah, I totally want to make items that like play up all the elements, but I don't want to just like, I say this all the time when we're coming up with new ideas. I'm like, I don't want to take this idea that was cool over here and just copy paste and replace a word. I want like something totally different. And we tried that. It didn't work out as well as I'd hoped originally. And we'll keep working on it. But there are examples of that. Like we had Frostburn gauntlets, which were meant to sort of be this thing that makes Frost really awesome. We even made Rhymeheart, and we're like, all right, cool. Maybe there'll be this really cool Frost build with like I chill things and that freezes them, and then Reinhardt just completely murders them, and maybe that'll be a whole play style. And when we were doing Legendary Gems, we deliberately avoided making a fire-oriented gem because we were like, well, in the same way we always say we want to promote diversity, we're like, fire's kind of the front runner, like by a large margin.
Yeah.
So let's try to make these gems that sort of play up the other elements a little more.
Efficacious toxins, poisons everything.
Totally.
near you.
Marinade for holy damage was the idea.
Yeah, just strikes holy damage on enemies nearby.
Yep. So we're still trying to reinforce that idea, and we'll keep pushing the other elements in ways that we can, but they're not there yet, and we're still working on it.
More things to look forward to in the future.
Yeah. Hopefully, yeah.
The next question comes from Lol-Esh on the forums, and they ask, balancing skills and classes. Are you planning to change the less used skills more frequently and give them a buff on items that buff certain aspects or rework skills more often?
I think Travis touched on this a little bit earlier, but our focus right now is to make legendaries and sets bring up the skills that aren't being used. A good example was when we reworked the Samuko set. We noticed Wave of Light wasn't being used at all. We wanted Wave of Light to be kind of a marquee skill on the monk, so we plugged it in there, and we have a Incense Torch, and so is Grin's Gaze, and we have all these Wave of Light items that make Wave of Light the top tier build with Samuko for now, and then we're going to have EP with Gungno gear and stuff like that. So EP hasn't been used too often before 212, and now it's going to be used a lot.
Yeah, in general, instead of trying to tune the skills individually too much, we do focus a lot on the set items. Another great example is the Marauder set. Marauder's got a change in patch 212 as well. Previously, for those who don't know, the way it used to work is you would drop sentry turrets, and the text on Marauders said, your sentries cast your spenders, right? And you would just load your hotbar up with lots of spenders, elemental arrow or multi-shot or a cluster arrow, and it would just shoot them for you. And it led to a gameplay style where your sentries were, 95% of your damage, and you drop your sentries, and then you just go, hide in the corner and make a sandwich. So we remade Marauders in 212 so that they cast your spenders when you do, and they cast the same spender as you do. And we had considered other ways to sort of get around this gameplay style, but rather than changing any of the skills, we opted to instead change the set items to make the set items really interesting. And I actually had friends tell me, or people come up and say, I was having so much fun, I couldn't wait to get my Marauder set. Then once I got my Marauder set, I felt awesome. I jumped 4 torment levels in difficulty, and then after about a week I was bored. And I was like, yeah, that's unfortunate. And other people love the turret style gameplay, and Travis and I both love talking about turret style gameplay a lot, but there needs to be kind of a push and pull there where you're still turret guy, but what you do still matters as well.
Yeah.
Right, the next question comes from Twitter. @Kralamon Adept asks, will you introduce more than one exclusive legendary item for each class this season?
There's currently no plans to do that. It's not to say we won't maybe in the future. Really, when we're making seasonal legendaries, it's sort of just a matter of there's going to be a finite number of them, right? We're not going to make every legendary seasonal only. And if we have a finite number of them, I want as many of them as possible to be exciting for everyone that plays, no matter what class they are. So if we make 10 new seasonal items, or let's say 12, if we instead made 2 for each class, well, there's only 2 things you're going to be excited about. Maybe you like it, maybe you don't. But the way we currently do it is we do like 6, like 1 for each class, and then a big like 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 that are sort of globally usable, like a 2-handed sword instead of a mighty weapon, for example. And that sort of ensures that everyone has more items to get excited about. That's why we have things like the legendary gems, the legendary potions, and more generic armor and weapons.
The next question comes from @Mr. Fizzletastic on Twitter. I love that Twitter name. That's so good. Mr. Fizzletastic.
Isn't it? That's done.
And they ask, are we going to know how long Season 2 will last so we can plan accordingly this time? I think a lot of players rushed early on in Season 1.
Yeah, it's kind of like we were mentioning earlier. The season length was probably a little bit on the long side for season 1. I think it was about 5 months. So I think we're looking to do shorter. It really depends on our development schedule. Our plan will be to end season 2, and then release a content patch, and then start season 3.
Whenever that is, depends on the
Whenever that
development
is,
cycle,
yeah.
to be honest.
Shorter than season 1 for sure, though.
All right. That wraps up the questions that we had gathered in advance. So we're actually ready now to take some of the live questions that we've been gathering from Twitch. So let's see what we have got here. First one comes from @KineticGTR, and they ask, "Where is the witch doctor offhand's sorrowful countenance? I want to avenge her by slaying countless demons with her power." This, I believe, was the disembodied head of the queen.
Yeah.
That was a witch doctor offhand. I think it was
is.
probably somewhere during beta.
Actually, I saw that art or that offhand. I think like a couple weeks ago, we were digging around through some files. One of our producers was sort of compiling a list of like, here's all these things we have that for some reason are not in the game. And he pulled that one up, and I was like, how does this not drop? Like, why is this not a thing? So, yeah, it totally should drop, and at some point, we will try to get around to coming up with a really cool idea for it. I don't know, maybe something haunt-oriented makes sense? It's a ghost head?
Okay.
I don't know.
Haunt, yeah.
Maybe.
Or it could be also, we had talked about, yeah.
Which one?
Firebomb, throw her head around.
Could do something with Spirit Barrage. Spirit Barrage doesn't get used
Spirit
a whole
Barrage
lot.
could totally be a thing.
Yeah, I mean, definitely want to look at some of the skills. Haunt's used right now in Jade Harvester,
yeah,
so
sure. Yeah,
or maybe
Spirit
it
Barrage.
complements Jade Harvester. Who knows?
Spirit Barrage could use some love, probably.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll try.
There's some ideas there. All right, let's see what our next question is. @BlackWolf asks, "Will the PC version ever get the Nemesis system? It sounds like so much fun." The Nemesis system's pretty cool.
Yeah.
For those who don't know, the Nemesis system is a console exclusive feature, which allows basically if a monster kills, one of your friends, that monster can then come back and be more powerful in your game or someone else's game. And what's really neat about it is it gives what we call, asynchronous multiplayer. It has a sense that there are other people playing and you're connected to your friends even though you're not playing at the same time. And that feature was developed for console particularly because the multiplayer is a little bit harder. On the PC side, we have features like clans, so we were introducing other things on console like the Nemesis system. It's a possibility, no promises. Right now, we were kind of focused on promoting multiplayer in other ways. Seasons, clans, leaderboards, friends list. So we're kind of focused on social mechanisms that feel good there. So I mean, I like the Nemesis system. So who knows?
Yeah.
Remains to be seen. We'll see what our next question is. Let's see if we can get that pulled up here. All right. Cyber Benny asks, "When are Greater Rift trials getting removed?"
So the trials are definitely something that, a funny story, we were talking about this yesterday, that the trials were actually supposed to be a convenience to replace something even more arduous, which was you used to start Greater Rifts at level 1 every time. And that was, at the beginning of the beta for Greater Rifts. You would start at 1 and then you'd skip ahead to like 6 and then 12 and then 18 and people are like, I'm Greater Rift 35. I hate going through every single Greater Rift. So we're like, hey, here's an idea. We'll take a whole rift and shrink it down into 15 seconds and then you can skip ahead really fast. But it's still something that isn't pleasant to do. I think Travis uses the "you're this tall" analogy a lot.
I was just about to say, yeah, I'm with you. I totally sympathize. We've talked about the trial thing, and we've talked about like ways maybe to improve it or remove it or modify it in some way. And the analogy I always use is like, all right, look, it's like when I'm going to Disney World and I get in line for a ride and they pull out the measuring stick and they're like, you must be this tall to ride this ride. I'm like, oh man, I'm not quite that tall. And then the next year I go back and I'm like, yay, I'm that tall. And then if I get off the ride and get right back in line, the guy's like, hold on, I'm measuring you again. I'm like, but I'm still that tall. I didn't shrink. Like, why do I have to prove I can do level 35 or 40? I just did it. I just did it. Just let me go right back in.
Yeah, in regards to why does a trial still exist, there's sort of a couple of reasons, and these aren't reasons why we could never get rid of trials. They're just kind of questions that we're asking and exploring. One is that we feel there's a lot of value in not always pushing yourself at the hardest difficulty all the time. So for example, if we just got rid of the trial and you could just be, in your hardest failure tier every single time, that could get, wary. So we're sort of discussing that. And the other concern that I have is multiplayer, particularly public games. If you go to do a public game, I might be maybe a Greater Rift, 25, let's say, and someone else is 20 and someone else is 30. But we all get matched kind of in a game together, and we don't know which Greater Rift to start at, We sort of have to talk and negotiate a little bit. And the trial is sort of this, organic way to place this public group in a correct rift together. And that's sort of the other problem that we're working to solve. But we recognize the problems, so we're just trying to figure out the best solution.
It's definitely a conversation that's been had
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
many
Oh,
times.
yeah,
absolutely.
So, all right, our next question. Let's see where this one comes from. Get this one up here. Aunt Tranquilize asks, do you ever plan on changing how sets are working? Every class has one set that determines the actual way of playing the class.
Not particularly. So that is one way to look at it. Another thing, this is kind of a chicken egg, and it's an interesting discussion to have whenever we sit down and talk about this. And I've had this conversation a few times. But before Reaper of Souls, we lived in an environment where items were just kind of stat sticks, and they weren't interesting, and they didn't really modify your gameplay. And a goal for us in Reaper of Souls was like, items should absolutely change the way you play the game. Like, if you find an item that says this skill is amazing, you're going to take that skill off your bar and put this skill on. Sets are kind of the inevitable conclusion of that decision, which is if the sets or if the items in our game are really powerful and really impactful, to some extent they are going to dictate the way you play. Like, if it's worth taking Bash off my bar to use Frenzy because this item says Frenzy's better, it's probably not going to be worth putting Bash back on my bar unless I have an item that says, well, now Bash is better too. But again, that is also why our biggest goal is continuing to make items to reinforce every skill in the game. We want players to have freedom of choice, and it's purely a matter of how many sets can we make, how many items can we make, how quickly can we make a cool weapon and a cool helm and a cool set for every skill in the game. And we're going as fast as we can and trying to continue adding diversity. Actually, that's why in one of our upcoming patches, in addition to adding the new sets we showed at BlizzCon, we're also going back and we're adding more set items to the old sets like Natalia's and Immortal Kings, and then we're also going to give them new set bonuses like 6-piece bonuses for Immortal Kings, so that we introduce even more playstyles as rapidly as we can.
Yeah, so in a future patch, there shouldn't be just one set that dictates your gameplay. There should be a plethora of sets that you can choose to get the higher grade reliefs.
Well, and hopefully not just sets, right? It's also a goal of ours, which it's hard to attain because it's not being as designer-handed as sets are, but we always want there to be these cool conglomeration of items where players can kind of hodgepodge their own gameplays. Kind of like the Frenzy idea Wyatt was talking about earlier. The Frenzy build that we keep trying to sort of make happen is a legendary gem and a belt and a mighty weapon and a pair of pants, and none of that's set items. It's just these all kind of work together in cool ways.
I do think it's sort of a false conclusion to say, sets, are, make it so that there's only one valid way to play. Let's say that this Frenzy build all of a sudden did become, the best barbarian build because we added, say, a chest piece and a helm that made Frenzy even better. I mean, what you have in essence at that point is a 5-piece set that happens to be composed of 5 different legendary items. So, I mean, players are always, wanting to look for what's best. I don't think the answer is to, get rid of sets. I think the answer is provide more options that are all, competitive.
Very cool. Let's see if we've got another one coming. Here we go. Shaylin asks, have the devs thought about making seasons unique, not with just transmog items, but with new gameplay elements? For example, unique mobs or unique mob affixes.
That's definitely an idea that we've discussed in the office quite a bit. I'm not saying that we are going to do it. Don't quote me. Yeah, but that's something that's come up in the forums a lot. That's coming on Reddit a lot, and that's come up with us a lot. So it depends on when we are able to do that, if at all.
I mean, part of it also is, would it be, can we do it without fragmenting, the player base a lot for matchmaking purposes? Yeah. Can we run 2 seasons concurrently? Can there be a short one and a long one? What does that look like? Because if we were to do something dramatic like I don't know, Adam, one of our designers, proposed, what if you couldn't heal? All healing was turned off. It's like, okay, well, that sounds really interesting. I want to try playing that game. And you'd probably have to change a bunch of things about the game to make that happen. It might not even look like Diablo anymore. Is that something that we want running for 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 months? Probably not. But it is something that we could experiment for, if we were able to. So that's sort of interesting also to look at when you play around with the rules, affecting everybody for a long time is probably not the best way to go about doing it.
All right. Let's see. Do we have another question prepped? We do. Aravit asks, what are the concerns regarding the new season? Do you guys have concerns regarding the new season? Or is there something that you're anticipating?
I mean, I think something that we talk about or have talked about internally, largely as a result of the beginning of season 1, is this fear that there's something horribly broken, wrong, mistuned, something that we don't know about, because players tend to not really push the boundaries of what can and can't be done in a game until they're competing with each other or environments like the start of a season. So something we said internally is hopefully we have found all of the things that players are doing that we didn't intend for them to do before the season launches and not after the season started. I feel like we do a pretty good job keeping on top of it, but there's way more players than there are us, and they're way cleverer than we are, so who knows? I mean, there might be something at the start of a season that sort of sets it off on the wrong foot, but
I don't know. There's one that comes to mind which, we've got our eye on it, and that is using a ruby and a lyrics crown in your helm. We were talking about that last week. We're like, is everyone gonna feel like they have to do this? And we looked at the numbers and we're like, no, actually, this is way better for the game that is an option but doesn't make you the most powerful. But we do not want everyone to feel like they have to do that, and it shouldn't actually be better. And if it turns out that everyone is forced into wearing, plus XP sets and Hellfire Ring and Ruby and Helm, and that's the best way to play, then we've got some ideas and solutions in mind. But we'll see, because right now we actually don't like the situation where I'm getting a 1,600% XP bonus from either my difficulty or from the Greater Rift, and then my Ruby adds a little bit, 62% more or something like that. It's piddly. So we don't want that situation either.
Yeah, that idea or that scenario came up I think last week or the week. I don't know. Time's a blur at this point to me, but that came up and we were talking about it, this guy is doing this thing with his helm and this ruby, and we just sort of stopped and went, okay, well, good. So there's someone not using a diamond. Okay, I don't know. I mean, maybe that's what we want. This might,
You know, something
That
like
seems okay
is
to
kind
me.
of on the fence, like it's okay or it's not okay. If we find that it's not okay, we probably wouldn't change it directly in the middle of the season. We'd probably wait till the next season as well.
You know, it'd be like if we introduced a gem, right? That in your weapon was better than an emerald. And everyone goes, oh my goodness, it's better than an emerald. It must be broken. It's like, no, maybe it's just a price, right?
Or maybe it's meant to be better than an emerald.
Yeah, but again, sacrificing current power for future power, especially to the degree to which you do that, like if you're making your own game less fun in exchange for the promise of future power, then that might be bad, and we'll need to take a look at how severe that is. But so far, it doesn't actually seem to be, you know, a catastrophic scenario.
Right. All right. I think we're ready for the next question. This one comes from Natsuma Z. Will there be any changes to the debuff that Hell Witches and Enslaved Nightmares apply? I feel that the reduce armor and all resist debuffs absolutely destroys melee characters.
Didn't we change that already?
Do something with that?
Yes.
It's not live yet, so that would be why.
Yes, there is a plan. There is a plan to change that. In general, I don't like. You know, it's not even how deadly it is. I actually like the idea that there's a deadly projectile. I don't like the fact that I have to mouse hover a debuff that has, you know, obscure text for me to understand what's happening to me. You know, we try as much as possible to put the mechanics of the game into a visual space that the players can understand intuitively. You know, Desecrator is a great example of that. We went over, Julian, our lead technical artist, and I went over like 4 or 5 different iterations of Desecrator to basically say people should understand within, you know, a split second at an instinctual level, don't stand in this. That debuff does not fit that criteria at all. There's this like slow moving whitish red orb that's drifting towards me, and if it touches me, it does almost nothing, but later on I get killed by someone 4 seconds later, right? And we didn't like that. So we are working on improving that. I thought it was already live. My mistake.
Yeah.
I can't.
I think we all did.
Some of the changes are live. Like we recently changed the shield that corrupted angels have, for instance, that prevented
God, I hated
all the
that thing so
damage
much.
Yes.
of one element if that's what you hit it with. So those had happened, and so it's all kind of part of a package revamp.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's something that sometimes people don't realize about the development process. You know, like the set items, right? They were shown at BlizzCon, but they're still, you know, months out, and that's because there's a lot of iteration and internal playtesting and then PTR that happens between the initial implementation and then after all the iterations, the final product.
Gotcha. The next question's here.
Sweet.
Let's see. I don't even know what to say there. Davaj says, should we expect patch 2.2 to drop 3 weeks before season 2 end, therefore ruining the leaderboards?
We
Well,
touched on this earlier,
did
but
talk
I
about
think in the future our schedule would be the season ends prior to a patch, and then the patch comes out, and then the new season starts after the patch comes out.
Yeah.
So the major content patches, any major changes, any new legendaries, we're planning on to happen between the seasons.
And I think with this last particular season, we did have reasons to put the patch where we did, which is that it was necessary to address some technical concerns.
Yeah. We actually, well, I don't want to get into it, but
the finer
basically
details,
we weren't comfortable with the amount of Anyway, during PTR, there were a few things that we hadn't checked during the season rollover, so we had to resolve that. Players shouldn't have to worry about it. It's stuff we'll worry about.
Let's see. The next one comes from Freak TD. They ask, are there any plans to add more challenging achievements, not conquests? Would like to see new achievements that provide a challenge to complete.
Oh, absolutely. I think something I'm working on for a future season, hopefully soon, is to make achievements more meaningful. And right now, when you look at your achievement pane and you see like 1,000 achievements, you're overwhelmed. And there's a couple like Punch Diablo. You're like, oh, that's not really crazy achievement. For seasons in the future, we want to make achievements feel like achievements. I can't really say more than that, but definitely in that vein, that we want to make achievements feel good when you get them.
Oh, Oh, that I'm looking forward to that. I like setting a goal for myself
Yeah.
in game, whether that's in a season with a conquest or whether that's just in the regular game in between. It's nice to have your gameplay guided for you. Oh no, bring
That
it
was
back.
a dupe.
Oh, was it a dupe?
It was a
Okay,
dupe.
it was a dupe. We've already seen that one then. There we go. Kuoish asks,
yeah.
any comment on zombie dog gear?
Totally. I mean, this is something we've talked about recently. Our community team has brought it up. We've read about it. People have talked about it in the company and on the team. And for those that don't know, I suspect what this question is asking is about zero dog gear, creating builds using legacy pre-repurposable items. We've talked about this a lot. We're totally okay with the builds people are doing with this. I think the thing that offends me, if anything, is that it takes items that aren't attainable in the game anymore. Like people are making builds that specifically require pre-repurposable items that most people don't have access to or don't even drop anymore. So we've talked about, well, maybe we're just going to recreate some of those old items and bring those forward. Maybe we don't do that. Maybe we just make some new items that totally obsolete those by doing even more powerful things. But yeah, the zombie dog items are something that's definitely on our radar.
There's, in general, we don't want to take away, some of the legacy items, but we understand people can't reach them anymore. It used to be that we didn't recreate the zero dog playstyle verbatim post ROS because there was. The main thing I didn't like about the playstyle is it involved summoning zombie dogs and then sacrificing them and then going back and forth, summons, sacrifice, summon, sacrifice. And in much the same way that the Marauder Sentry build meant drop some sentries, don't do anything, the zero dog sacrifice build meant, although it was powerful and caused a lot of screen shake, by the way, the other issue is that you weren't actually that conscientious about where your dogs were standing, where the enemies were. I mean, maybe you'd position yourself to be a little bit safer, but you weren't aiming skills. You have two untargeted skills that are very effective, but really takes away some of that tactical depth, that we want. And not to say that Diablo is the most tactically deep game, but we want there to be some thought put into your button presses, including, where am I aiming this skill is such a fundamental aspect that we want to preserve, and the zero dog build doesn't have that. However, we have reworked sacrifice since then. Sacrifice is now our targeted skill. So it's worth investigating again whether the zero dog build or something like it can come back. The other issue that I have with it right now is that part of the way in which it's being used is generating large amounts of health globes to feed demon hunters. And I like that there's a party synergy there. I think that's great. I also don't mind that the Witch Doctor has a mechanism to give the demon hunter extra hatred. What I don't like, because I'm a stickler about this, is excessive amounts of health being handed around. I think that large amounts of health being handed out is what results in people kind of changing their characters to be more glass cannon and, just surviving, having just enough health to survive half a second because they know another health globe is on the way. And then that results in people being one shot by jailer or whatever, right? So we'd probably have to solve that issue next before we, in any implementation, to compete with the zero dog build. So that was kind of a long answer.
We've got a bunch more questions I've just been told, so let's see how many more we can get through.
Rapid fire.
Andipen asks, will we be seeing more season-only legendaries or legendary recipes?
Absolutely. Yeah, the current plan is to just continue making new seasonal items every time we have a season.
Yeah. Bring them on.
Yeah. Yes.
Quick and simple, yes. All right, our next one comes from Pantsunk, and they ask, will the Talk to Alaric quest in Torment 6 be fixed for Season 2 to avoid speed leveling? I actually know the answer to this one. It's already being worked on.
Yes.
So there's a hot fix on its way for this one.
Sweet.
So that one's
Go us.
also quick and easy.
Yeah.
Let's see. Lawbringer asks, what are your plans regarding Blood Shard cap? When are you planning to introduce changes to this element of the game?
That's actually a fair question. I will be the guy who takes the blame for this because I actually constantly have told people like, no, the cap is there for a very explicit reason. However, there are exceptions to every statement. So the reason we have a blood shard cap is a really important one, and one that I stand by, which is the cap forces people to figure out what this thing is and how to use it. It's something that internally, like designers from our company, from our team, have come to me and said, like, yeah, I got these blood shards. I don't actually know what they do, but eventually I hit this cap, so I went and asked my friend, and they told me where to spend them, which, admitting that's not a good solution to what do I do with this thing, we should have explained that better. It's very important to me that players spend the blood shards. Like, blood shards are a really big part of the reward structure. They're a huge part of like your ability to finish sets or find items you're looking for. So the cap is in place predominantly so that people who are new to the system are forced at some point to learn how to interact with it, and also to prevent people from deferring their reward for some tremendous length of time. And without getting too designery, it's something we've talked about all the time, or like I've talked about a lot, which is deferring reward is bad if we allow you to do it infinitely. If there's no cap.
I also want to add, it's useful for new players, but for me, my most important reason is actually not just the new players, but the experienced players as well. Because there's this whole other crowd who also voluntarily defers their reward, and that's the people who are trying to min-max their blood shards. Maybe you have 3 pieces of a set, and there's 3 other pieces you can get left, and you're like, well, maybe I'll wait until one of those 3 pieces drops before I dump all my shards on the other slot. And these are players who know exactly what blood shards do, who are conscientiously deferring their reward and saving up those blood shards. And the issue there is we don't want them deferring their reward either, because we don't want them to just be dreaming about this set item someday in the future that they may get, and then get nothing for 8 hours because they've deferred all their reward. Not to mention, like, also if you're forced, for example, to make a choice and you just spend all your blood shards on, say, shoulders, maybe you'll pick up a different shoulder on the way. That's actually a very typical Diablo experience. Is you want one item. There's one item that you really want, but you get some other item on the way, and you're like, oh, well, that's cool. Let me go and use this other item in the meantime, and that's changed up your game. And we really need that to happen.
So at the core of the question, is that anything we're planning to change in the future, or?
We've definitely talked about exceptions to it. Recently, we had discussed, this got brought up again, because blood shard cap gets brought up every week at our community dev meeting. And we started talking about this, and we sort of went, you know what, okay, to be fair, the cap was intended to be something that wasn't easy to hit, but is there to make sure you know what these are for and you spend them. But then we introduced greater rifts, and we introduced like really escalated blood shard rates, and we added blood shard goblins, and people find themselves hitting this cap way more frequently than we ever really intended.
Yeah.
So we've talked about ways to preserve the cap, but maybe let you increase your cap by doing parts of the content or through some mechanism. So we have plans to maybe address it in some way in the future, but nothing specific to announce right now.
Talk about right now. All right. Let's see. Our next question comes from Phone Books and Duct Tape. I love that name. That's a great name.
Okay.
Any plans on changing Ren's animation speed? Ren should be like Warcry or Overpower, where it doesn't interrupt Whirlwind.
I know it has come up. It's the Overpower and Warcry have, for the record, no animation speed. So he's not just by changing it, he means removing it.
Yeah. John's probably at his desk right now.
It's tough because on the one hand, like, I think from just when you're whirlwinding around and you want to rend, it really does break up that pace, right? At the same time, whenever we make something a secondary animation, there's a couple things happen. One, players tend to not appreciate like the cost of it as much. A lot of our skills are tuned around the idea that there's a risk associated with this. Like if I'm whirlwinding, that moment when I stop to rend is a moment when I'm slightly more vulnerable. And of course, from a player's point of view, you're like, yeah, how about I'm not more vulnerable? How about if I just can keep whirlwinding and I'll be honest, as a designer, I'm not sure if I want you to be less, less vulnerable. I kind of like that moment where you actually have to decide, is it safe for me to stand here for, 2/3 of a second and actually cast my whirlwind. That said, there's a push and pull there, right? Because it does kind of slow down your flow a little bit. So, it's something to consider, but I just, especially with the whirlwind and rend set coming out, we'll have to play test it and look.
Yeah, I mean, having spent 400, 500 hours doing whirlwind barb in classic Diablo, I totally get what you're talking about. At the same time, I'm with Wyatt. As a player and a designer, there was always the decision of I kind of want to rend. There's a lot of monsters, but I might die if I do this right now. And at the same time, from the designer's perspective, I don't think it's healthy necessarily to have a build where the expectation is you just what do you do? You infinitely hold down right click and you just do this around. You play
and then
Pac-Man,
cast,
and just push some
battle
buttons that are also
and
happening
Warcry
while I'm
and-
doing this. At that point, there's not a lot of decisions to be made. The gameplay is literally hold this one button forever. I think it's a lot healthier the way it is right now. That's not to say maybe it wouldn't change in the future, but you would need to make a really, really strong argument for changing it.
Right. The strongest argument I've heard so far is it feels bad when I do it. And it's like, oh, of course it does feel bad because it's your moment of weakness. Sorry.
Yeah.
We've got about 10 minutes left, so let's see how many more we can get in here. Songstian asks, will there be higher torment difficulties?
Let's failed that one.
I don't know. Normally this is in the context of doing a rift. Greater rifts are, obviously they scale infinitely, and there's a few differences. And one of, I mentioned earlier that we've been looking at the relationship between adventure mode, rifts, and greater rifts. And so I think rather than just adding more torment difficulties, you want to step back and kind of examine what is the intended role of each of these things, And we're sort of settling on, adventure mode is sort of like early 70s plus a little bit later, and maybe something that you come back and revisit periodically. And even as you mature, if you all want to do, say, make a new Hellfire amulet, then I'll return to adventure mode. And there's still reasons, but maybe it's not something that's mandatory. And that's kind of where we've been thinking about adventure mode. But then the Nephilim rifts versus greater rifts question is a much tougher one, because they're a little more similar to each other. And so there's a little bit of overlap in the purpose that they serve. And I think a lot of people who want to do Nephilim rifts, the normal rifts, don't like having the timer. They feel like there's a little bit too much pressure. But greater rifts is supposed to, obviously you have the legendary gems, you don't have to pick up loot on the way, which I actually enjoy. I like having all the reward at the end. But there's a little bit more pressure there. So I don't know if we'll have more difficulties after Torment 6. I think we have to answer the question first, what is the intended differentiation between those two play styles? What kind of a player chooses to do rifts rather than greater rifts, and how can we best serve them?
All right. The next question comes from Harlabelle. Just curious if it might be in the works to make Forgotten Souls easier to obtain, such as an item like the Sages set that causes an additional one to drop every time one drops.
It's an interesting idea. I don't actually think they're that hard to attain, but maybe I just play this game way too much. I've got thousands in my bank. We've added a lot of mechanisms, excuse me, to help players get Forgotten Souls. We added them as just things that drop if you're doing rifts, greater rifts. You can get bounty bag legendaries pretty reliably, so there's Forgotten Souls to be had there. Any legendary item you find that you don't like, you've got them to use for enchanting or whatnot. I'd be more curious how you're running out of them. Yeah. If you're enchanting a lot or crafting a lot.
I don't know if this was the intention of the question. I'm going to reinterpret slightly, but I find that I'm short Forgotten Souls sort of in the early life of a character, or the beginning of a season, and then I hit a point where I'm wearing something legendary in every slot. I've enchanted, and now I'm only enchanting newly found items. And then once you hit that point, all of a sudden your Forgotten Souls start racking up. And it could be kind of maybe those first, that first phase that they're missing the most. I particularly notice when I hit 70 and I want to, craft a legendary item and it requires 2 Forgotten Souls to craft. I'm like, I'm in all yellows. I don't have any Forgotten Souls. So I think we've talked a little bit about how to make that early initial experience, those first 20 hours, better in terms of access to Forgotten Souls. But like Travis was saying, once you cross over this threshold, suddenly you're swimming in Forgotten Souls and you have too many. So we're kind of simultaneously looking at both. How do we give more early on, but then actually provide more syncs for them later?
Yeah.
None of that's for season 2, but it is something that is on the radar, and I anticipate people will probably notice during season 2. You'll feel this as you play season 2. You're like, I don't have enough Forgotten Souls. 1 week later, I have too many.
It's actually something our lead designer Kevin Martins was telling me one day. It's like, dude, I can't enchant this thing. I'm like, what do you mean? It's like, I used them all on my other character. I'm like, oh well, like the way you get more Forgotten Souls is finding items that aren't an upgrade or that you don't care about necessarily. But if you play like a big stable of characters, none of them necessarily are like swimming in legendaries that they don't need, because everything you find is an upgrade for that guy.
Yeah.
And then you're using all of your enchanting mats constantly between 4 characters. And if you're in that group of people, like, great. I want you, like, this ultimately, like, the answer to that question is, I'm glad you want them. Like, if you are running out, that is by some extent by design. If you're running out and you just can't get any more, that's a problem. But we have added lots of ways, like, okay, go do some bounties maybe and just disenchant the bag legendaries, or go do some rifts and the rift bosses drop them. So we've provided ways for players to gain more if they need more. But I'm pretty happy that you don't have 1,000 in your bank like I do, because I have to figure out, like, all right, what do I do for someone that's got 1,000 Forgotten Souls in their bank?
Yeah, I'm exactly like Kevin. Especially because I do the player way feature every week. I have one of every character. And so I'm always swapping up my builds to test out, let's do this player way or this player way. And I don't know the last time I had over 10 in my stash. So, let's see. Oh, we've got another one. Drewski asks, will we be able to equip more rings? Right now, Unity, SOJ, ROG means no other rings are usable.
We could give you toe rings and belly button rings and pinky rings and earrings. No, that's a statement that I've heard. And it's fair, and it makes me kind of sad, because it means I need to do a better job at rings. But I have frequently said, this is a terrible example, but I'll say it anyways. If there's a ring that said you have unlimited resources, and there's a ring that said you deal quad damage or whatever, like, I could easily make rings that would make you take off your Unity, take off your Roaring Grandeur. The problem is there's not enough rings that are as awesome as Unity and Roaring Grandeur. So we've been putting a lot of effort into actually just, like, as of this week, we were like implementing a bunch of new rings for one of our upcoming patches, with the goal of making them as awesome as Roaring Grandeur and Unity. I think when Wyatt made Tall Man's Finger, that was like one of our goals too. Like, okay, this thing has to make a really freaking awesome dog, because it's competing with these 2 insanely powerful items. So rings, just like every other category, have a lack of diversity. But really, that's just a matter of saying, okay, well, what are some really, really powerful effects that we can make? Make them rings. If you've got 10 or 15 rings that are all as good as those, suddenly you've got a really difficult choice, and they're all really impactful. So that's where we want to be eventually with rings.
Yeah, I think about focus and restraint.
Oh God, they're so bad.
So I mean, it's kind of like Travis was saying. Initially, we were like, this is how powerful a legendary item should be, and then over time, our legendary items have gotten more and more powerful, and suddenly, focus and restraint, you look at them and you're like, this is terrible.
Yeah.
Well, you know what? Compared to yellow rings, they were really good. But compared to Unity and Ring of Royal Grandeur, they're just a drop in the bucket.
Yeah.
So, and those rings are asking you not just to give up one ring, but both rings.
Yeah.
So we're like, hey, one of these days, let's revisit focus and restraint. We're not doing it, we don't know what we're doing yet with it, but revisit it so that it actually is strong enough to make people consider for certain types of builds, and maybe it enables new play styles to take off Unity and Royal Ring and wear those instead.
I think John was working on it like a couple of weeks ago, and he
so.
asked me for feedback. I was like, make the number bigger.
Not good enough. Yeah. The funny thing with Focus and Restraint is actually during ROS beta, before we really had a sense of like how impactful our items were going to be, and we were just in crazy land at the time. We had Focus and Restraint, and I think the old power used to be whenever you cast an ability while at full resource, it deals 50% bonus damage. And a QA was testing builds, and they go back to us and they're like, dude, that's crazy. There's this Gerfalcon foot that makes Blessed Shield free. And we were like, holy crap, that'll make it 50% better all the time. That's way too good. And then we changed it. And then like, I don't know, like a few months back, we were like, if we had shipped it exactly as it was, it would still not be good. Like if that said 2-piece bonus, Gerfalcon foot's 50% better, people would laugh at it. So like it's definitely, we're in a different environment than we were, and we fully acknowledge like, yeah, there's some rings that need love. That set especially needs a lot of love.
Yeah, I mean, I think John was kicking around some ideas. He was like, what if it, when you hit full resource, the buff stayed on you for 5 seconds? You know, what if you got more damage based on how much % resource you had left, so you didn't have to always be at full? What if, you know, it only affected, it had nothing to do with resource, but affected all of your spenders or all of your generators? And that's when Don was like, oh yeah, it does 50% more, it does 500% more, right? It's just like, but
Not exactly 500. but-
yeah. So step one, figure out a mechanic that we think is really cool and will enable new ways to play. Step two, pick a number big enough that it competes with with the rings that are there.
And it's like, as a random, like, on the 5,500 thing, it's always the tuning stick, or not even the tuning stick, but like the litmus test I use when people are like, that idea sucks. I'm like, okay, what if it said 10,000%? And they're like, oh, that's crazy. I'm like, clearly the idea doesn't suck. We just need to find the right tuning value.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's move on to the next one. We actually have a little bit of extra time, so we're going to see if we can take a few more questions. This one comes from Calicio, and they ask, when will you guys make giving our follower upgrades easier to compare items for?
That's fair.
It can actually be pretty
Yeah.
complicated
you
to
gotta
kind of
do
compare.
This thing, right? You're like, check it, check this, check it, check this. I don't know. This has come up before. I don't think we had a good solution for it though.
Yeah.
Johnny had a mock-up for that at one point.
Maybe. I haven't seen it then.
It's on our radar, but I'm not sure where it is.
Yeah. I don't think we have anything to share, but it is something we've discussed.
Right. Well, good to know it's on the radar, right?
Yeah,
Like, I mean, sometimes
I
it
don't
takes time to
remember
find the
what
right.
it
I've wanted that
Solution.
too, and I think what we had difficulty with was, there were just some UI elements, and the screen was getting cluttered.
A little bit, yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Let's see. The next one comes from Blayod, and they ask, will there be a new Skullgrasp ring at Season 2?
That's not Season 2,
I don't think it's Season
right?
2.
No.
I think that's our next
It's
big
supposed to come
content
out
patch.
with the Whirlwind set.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
That's right.
There you go.
Yeah,
So-
that
That's the
happened
answer.
to the, there was a Wizard legendary that we showed at BlizzCon as well, which we realized it was supposed to be for Season 2 initially.
yeah.
And they were like, wait a minute, this legendary is useless without the
without
new
the
Wizard
that
set.
it's meant to be used for.
And Skullgrasp is in the same boat.
All right.
Yep. Totally correct.
We didn't want a class seasonal item to be, here's your seasonal legendary. It will do something next season.
It'll be awesome when that set comes out later.
The next question comes from I Play Games 10, and they ask, will you ever implement any sort of trade system? I'm aware of gold buying issues and et cetera. Having a trade system is a huge deal.
I'm gonna be the guy who says like I'm really against this. I think we've talked about this a lot.
Yeah, no, I disagree as well. I agree with
Right.
you. Yeah.
Okay. I was gonna say, oh shit, here we
I
go.
don't want it, at least not the way people are usually
Imagining
picturing
it.
it.
Yeah, I mean,
I'll let you finish.
We talked about this a lot, like a whole lot, and this was kind of a holy war for us internally about like trading is integral to Diablo. It's always been part of the experience. Oh, but you know, the other side of the coin is, but here's what trading actually turns into, and here's the side effects, like gold farming sites or people selling things and stealing your account, or even just I used to say like the nostalgia of like, yeah, the idea of trading with my friends, cool. Here's what really happens. He joins my game, he opens a stash, he throws some stuff over his shoulder, and then there's a pile of loot on the ground and he leaves. And that was a really cool moment for about 5 minutes. And then I realized like, but that was, that was like 20 hours of gameplay I just lost because he gave me all these things. So we definitely talked a lot about trading. We talked about how we can preserve as much as possible, and really the only thing we felt comfortable with was what we ended up with in game, which is you're allowed to give stuff to people if you find it while you're playing together, and only for a certain amount of time. And we're happy with that. Yeah. Like I actually think the trade change is a substantial part of why people had such a better experience with ROS, why they felt like the item game was greatly improved, was a lot because they were back to this sense of like earning the cool things they had and feeling like the things they were wearing were actually, kind of a symbol of prestige or accomplishment. Because if you saw me in my awesome set, like I earned this. I didn't go to the auction house and buy it. I didn't have someone give it to me.
I think the nostalgia factor that Travis mentioned is can't be understated. Like I think a lot of players have really great memories of trading in Diablo 2, and I'm going to use an example from a different game, Magic: The Gathering. I have awesome memories of going out to my local card shop and trading cards in stores. And what happened is all of a sudden, a magazine started publishing prices, and that completely changed how trading was. And it didn't feel the same way anymore. And then the internet came, and the internet changed everything. And I don't think you could say, oh man, remember those days when you had to like just trade the trading cards and no one knew what the prices were? And I think that that is a wonderful memory, but it's impossible to recreate now that the internet actually exists.
Yeah.
And Diablo 2 is the same way. If we just did what Diablo 2 did, and people have said, just do it like Diablo 2, it worked back then. It's like, yeah, well, if you build me a time machine, we'll ship it. It's fine, but it doesn't work now. I actually want to specifically address one other suggestion that comes up a lot, because people are like, okay, I get why you don't have trading. Please have clan trading. Can we still at least have clan trading? And I want to call this one out because that comes up. Honestly, play with your clan mates. Travis touched on, if you play a game together, you can trade within that game. And the reason why we don't allow clan trading, the way I see it, when I give you an item, I am short-circuiting your reward loop. At the end of the day, if I give you an amazing helm, that is a helm you did not find. That is potentially 4 or 5 helms you might have found and enjoyed finding on your own. And I just gave you a helm that skipped all of that. However, in some circumstances, like that feels really good to progress those 5. And if I know you and I have a social connection to you, then as designers, we're basically giving up, part of that reward loop in exchange for social currency and social feel good, between those two players, and that's worth something too. And I feel that a clan is just a little bit too distant. You're going to be trading with people. You're not going to see them as close friends that you killed stuff with. I mean, you might, but you're more likely, especially in larger clans, to see them as trade partners who are utility to you, and that's not what we want.
All right. Let's see, we have another one coming up, and this one comes from Uruziel, and they ask, are you planning on adding other item grades like epic or mythic or some kind of real ancient?
Not currently. We don't have any discussion to do that. I think what we have in place in terms of item progression is pretty solid. I think it's fulfilling all the needs that the game has right now. We had talked when we were making ancient items, like the original ancient item pitch started out way more comprehensive. It involved like multiple tiers of ancient items. And eventually we realized, like, we don't need this deep of a system. All we really need is, like, one more tier that's kind of the chase rares, right? Like the foiled cards, or the legendaries, or the legendaries in the Hearthstone sense of like they're really rare, but they're super awesome. We just needed more of that to help sort of the case where we're giving away so many items and the drop rates are so generous, and Kadala is more generous now than she ever was before. But we wanted to preserve some sense of rarity. If we find that we need more of that later, we have the ability to. We don't have any plans currently, though, and I think we'll cross that bridge if we come to it.
Let's see. Do we have another one prepped? We do. Shadowlin asks, will you implement class-specific gambling, i.e. Diabos, since most builds are focused around one weapon? It's very hard to obtain that item through Kadala.
Wyatt touched on this earlier, and it's something that we've talked about a lot as a team, which is we've always said it's okay if you want item X, but we want you to find items Y and Z along the way and maybe change your plans, right? Like maybe I really want a Maximus, but oh man, I found a Gerfalcon foot. Maybe I'll try Blessed Shield build instead of the Sweeping Strike build I was going to try. And we want that in our game. We want that moment to moment of like, we want you to be surprised. We want you to go, oh man, totally didn't expect this. This is awesome. I feel like when people bring that up, like, I just want to gamble on Furnace. Just let me gamble on Two-Handed Maces. Like, I want you to find things that are not Furnace. I want you to find the thing that's not the Diabo. I want you to find the item and go, oh man, this is actually really cool. Now, maybe for some classes and specs, not maybe, like realistically for some classes and specs, that doesn't happen as much as we'd like it. And over time, it will more and more as we, again, continue adding items and retrofitting old items and deepening all these pools. So there's no plan to add like Diabo-specific Kadala, but that's why.
We've got a handful more questions, and we're going to try to speed run through them real quick.
Lightning round.
Lightning round. The Shadow Fiend asks, will single target abilities ever be viable? Do you have any plans to make them stronger?
Hey, Wyatt, Don?
The upcoming sets may and abilities or legendaries could buff them. I think one of the sets I have in mind is the Dashing Strike set. It's totally different from what we showed at BlizzCon, but in the future it will focus more on making those generators on better.
The next one comes from Commodore Rogus, and they ask, my only question for the Tavern Talk, is the new Witch Doctor set going to revolve around spirit spells instead of more pets and poison?
We don't have a new Witch Doctor set.
Not for this season.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's a totally reasonable suggestion. When we get to making the next Witch Doctor set, we will keep that in mind.
Yeah,
Got that offhand. Spirit Barrage.
Yeah, apparently Ghost Head.
Ghost Head.
Next one, the real Evan asks, what is the overall idea behind clans? Why are clans in Diablo 3, and maybe can we see some endgame related to them in the future?
Clans primarily are so that you have a sense of identity, a group to play with, people to talk to and hang out with. Are there, I guess the question is, are there going to actually be activities and mechanics associated with clans later? Maybe, right now we still view clans as an optional opt-in social thing. We don't want it to be where you're like min-maxing who you play with. We don't want it to be, I'm friends with you, but I don't want to be in a clan with you because you're dragging my clan down. And we have some ideas around that. I don't know if that's as high a priority, honestly, than some of the other things we have on our plate. But more ways, like one thing that we do value is more ways to socially interact with other people online. So we'll be looking at those kind of things.
All right. Next question is coming from Nightspawn1234. I love Natalia's set. Any plans in making it compete with the Marauders set?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
In our next, content patch.
One of the sets that's getting.
All of the classic Diablo 3 sets, the Natalia's, Immortal Kings, Ina's, Tarashas.
I forget.
Helltooth?
No. Holy crap, who did we forget? Zunimasa!
That was
Sorry. All 5 of those sets actually are getting more items added to the sets and
more
6-piece bonuses to go with it, in hopes that that'll help create just even more playstyles for everybody.
All right.
And yes, we're still working on Helltooth.
That's...
We haven't forgotten.
Yep.
It's not ready yet.
All right.
No.
Roz,
That's so bad.
Roz1337 asks,
Invokers.
are you planning to do the fetish AI smarter when you use the Dagger of Darts Carnival build so that they don't shoot at walls?
That's an interesting question.
Well, I mean, they shoot from where they're standing.
I guess they're targeting
I
something
don't-
across the wall.
I don't think that we have any immediate plans to do that, to be honest. That means that some environments they do better than others. What I don't want is I don't want it to be your fetishes shoot when you do, unless they're standing behind a wall, in which case they'll just keep walking, right? I mean, I'm making fun a little bit, but on a serious note, no, I mean, they shoot when you do, and there's nothing immediate.
All right. The next question comes from Proteus 12K. Auto pickup for materials and gems with the option to turn off in settings. Also for health potions. We talked about this a little
We
bit.
talked about it
this.
earlier.
Yeah.
The 15-second summary is that I think when you auto pick up something, you don't register as much what you got. You lose a connection to those items, and they feel less real. These are all reasons that the designers care about. I know sometimes the players don't always appreciate that, so we are looking at solutions to basically address our concerns that you feel a connection to these, while still alleviating all the click, 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 click of these things that you know you want. So we'll meet in the middle.
A few more. Fistion asks, any plans to implement a DPS meter?
No.
No. No.
That we can move on.
Yeah.
No.
Sorry. Let's see. Kuitji, I guess. I'm probably murdering that. Will Hellfire crafting be addressed? You can literally farm 100 hours and not craft anything useful.
We could look at it later. It's definitely a matter of how worth it is. That's a fair statement. Yeah, I don't know. We don't have any immediate plans, but it's certainly something that we can discuss internally. We acknowledge that they may,
RNG,
they
yeah,
probably require, you know what, actually just thinking about it, my best answer would be, I'm okay with them being random, like super random, but if they're super random, they shouldn't be super time intensive.
Yeah.
So one of those two things should give a little.
Right. Next question comes from Donka Shane, and they ask, what are you going to do about Unity being a requirement for some classes in solo Greater Rift progression?
I think Travis touched on this earlier. We just got to make rings that are better, and that can compete with Unity, SOJ, and Royal Ring.
Isn't one of the new wizard seasonal item?
Yeah,
competing?
it's meant to be like a sort
It's
of.
pretty defensive. It might work with some builds, but the current Firewoods build does not lend itself to it.
Well, it's also the same reason that we're adding more, I guess, more compelling defensive and healing gems,
Yeah.
right? Like, the reason some people say, like, oh, this is mandatory is because, well, it's the most impactful thing they can do to increase their survivability. If they want to increase their survivability, we just want them to have ways to do that. Like, maybe it's you do it with gems and not the ring. Maybe you do it with the ring so that you can use different gems or items or whatever. So, yeah, it's totally our goal to add more diversity there.
Next question comes from Supple Think, and they ask, the only way to make Ring of Royal Grandeur less necessary is more two-piece sets. Are there plans to do this?
I don't agree with that statement, and no. The way to make Royal Ring Grandeur less necessary is make rings that are so awesome, you'll take off a Royal Ring Grandeur for it. I think it sets a really high bar, so people have a hard time imagining, like, well, what does that mean? But in a lot of builds, like on my Sun Wukong build, on my Monk, I don't need to use a Royal Ring. I do, because then I can use a different legendary piece of my choice. But if there was a really awesome ring, I would just take off the Royal Ring Grandeur and put my sixth piece of Sun Wukong, or fourth piece of Sun Wukong back on. So I think that's a totally solvable problem, and it's pretty high on our priority list, and it's something that our next content patch hopefully will alleviate for some people.
All right. Next question. The Dead Set asks, how do you feel about the support DPS class dynamics in Greater Rifts? Do you agree with it, or is support not intended?
I think as long as the gameplay is fun, I'm okay with it. That's as far as I go.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, I think the gameplay needs to be somewhat engaging. Obviously, you're in co-op, so there's some inherent decisions that are being made by virtue of you being in a co-op situation. I also think that things change over time. You know, what is currently the best today may not be the best, as soon as the season starts, 2 months from now, 4 months from now, 6 months from now. Again, our focus is on providing really fun gameplay styles, and I expect the 4-player meta to shift over time as a result.
All right. And we have time for one more question, so this will be our last one before we head out for the day. This one comes from Gaffatrools, and they ask, is there any plan to add alternative uses for crafting materials after a certain point? They feel like they just sit there and look pretty.
Do they look pretty? That's impressive.
It is called Exquisite Essence, right?
That's true. That's true. Yeah, I mean, so again, with the material thing, it is certainly an issue where it's kind of feast or famine. There's parts in your gameplay experience where you're going to need more than you have, and then there's parts where you have more than you need. I think in both directions, really, our primary goal is just to make sure that when you don't have enough, you know how to get more, and when you have too many, you know what you can do with it. I think we're kind of lacking on the end of, well, what do I do if I have 1,000 blue, yellow, and legendary crafting mats? And I've got some plans for that for the future. So it's not something we're not going to address. Like, hopefully we will have really solid solutions, but that's a ways out.
All right, then. That wraps up our time here for Tavern Talk. So first off, I want to thank everybody for joining us, both our fans and also for you gentlemen for taking time out of our day. So thanks so much. And it's great that you gave us not only insight on the season, but took time to answer as many questions as you did. So we really appreciate that.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, it was fun.
Of course. If you missed a portion of today's show, don't worry. We're going to throw it up on both YouTube and on our Twitch channel, so you'll be able to watch this shortly afterwards. In addition, I hope you're as excited as I know we are for Season 2. And don't forget that it starts this Friday. For the North America region, it'll be 6 p.m. And if you're in another region, just head to Diablo3.com and you'll be able to look up when exactly the season is starting for you. I think that wraps everything up. So before we go for today, thanks again once more. And may all your loot be legendary.